Donald Trump is selling his economic chaos with one simple story. And that very simple story is that between the years of 1945 to 1981, and yeah, I realize he keeps talking about 1890, but this is really the story that most Americans are hearing, is those years from the end of World War II until the beginning of the Reagan administration. This is before Reagan and Clinton had embraced free trade neoliberalism. A single worker in an American factory could buy a house, take a nice vacation every year, get a new car every couple of years, put his kids through college, and retire with a comfortable pension, all because we made things in America. And when the free trade era began, it would be 1981, it took 90,000 factories and 40 million high-paying jobs with it to China and other low-wage countries, which kicked off the immiseration of the middle class. And to get back to that prosperity, all we need to do is use tariffs to force manufacturing back to the United States. So that's the story that they're selling us, right? Trump, and we saw Howard Lutnick talking about how, Americans, you're going to have millions of Americans screwing little tiny screws into iPhones. And, sewing with ladies' bras and things like that, on sewing machines. Bring back the factories and you'll bring back prosperity is essentially their pitch. And, for low information MAGA voters, it sounds good. Hey, when we used to have factories in the United States from 1945 to 1980s, those factories paid high wages and good benefits. You had, my dad, worked in a tool and die shop his entire life, or most of his life, for 40 years. And he had a good salary. He was able to buy a house. My mom never had to go to work. He bought a new car every 2-3 years. He had a nice pension when he retired. He raised 3 boys. He did it, right? And you think, oh, well, was it the factory that did that? The tool and die shop. Well, it turns out it wasn't. What did that was that there was a labor shortage at the end of World War II. There was an explosion in demand as a result of, years and years, 5 years specifically, of rationing things. And we didn't even manufacture cars for a couple of years, or in any consequential way, because the car factories are building bombers. So after World War II, there was this explosion of demand for goods. And to meet that explosion of demand for goods, we had an explosion of demand for labor. And the result of that was that working people could say, no, I'm not going to work unless you pay me a decent wage and let me join a union. And so, we went from kind of marginal union membership. There was no union membership in 1935. To, by 1981, a third of us being in unions. I say us, I'm a union member myself right now. So a third of us were in unions when Ronald Reagan came into office, and what that meant was that 2/3 of us had the equivalent of union jobs and union benefits, because those union jobs established the local wage and benefits floor. Employers had to compete against union shops for workers. And, so there you go. Well, Reagan put an end to that with his war on unions. He said, the union bosses are like leeches on your back. They're just sucking the blood out of American workers and all this kind of stuff. And they're all corrupt and it's all Jimmy Hoffa and all this stuff. And he declared war on unions, to the point that, in the last year of the first Trump administration, private sector union membership was down to 5.9% of the American workforce. So only about 11 to 12% of American workers had the equivalent of a good union job, which is why we went from 2/3 of us being in the middle class in 1981 to 47% of us today. So it turns out it wasn't the factories that built the middle class. It was the unions. Now, you can argue that, you wouldn't have the unions without the factories and vice versa, and I'll give you that argument. And Trump keeps talking about, yes, we're going to bring back these jobs and we're going to make them union jobs, but Honda's got a factory in Alabama and a factory in Indiana. There's no union in either place. Unionized workers at McDonald's in Denmark make more money and have better benefits. They have 6 weeks of paid vacation, free health care, and free college. And they make $22 an hour. They get better pay and benefits than the non-union factory workers at the Honda factories in Indiana and Alabama. So, bringing back factories without bringing back unions, and the Republicans are still, Trump just put Lori Chavez DeRemer in charge of the Labor Department, and she's openly hostile to labor. She's publicly talked about how, we need right to work for less laws, which allow people to say, no, I don't want to pay my union dues, screw the union. Even though the union by law is required to defend them, represent them, negotiate on their behalf, include them in everything they do. These right to work laws are just insanely unfair to unions, which is the whole point. I mean, this is why, Taft-Hartley was passed back in 1947 over 2 vetoes by Harry Truman. So here we are. The Trump voters are thinking, oh yeah, American manufacturing. When manufacturing was big in America, we had lots of money, we had prosperity. Not realizing that it was all because of unions that Donald Trump is actively, his Labor Department, actively trying to block or destroy. So the bottom line here is very simple. Donald Trump says that he's trying to bring back factories, but the simple reality is you can't have a middle class without unions. And no matter how loudly Trump tries to sell his dream, it's strong unions and high levels of unionization of our workforce that make, the middle class real. And Republicans will never go along with that. Pass it along, right? We've got to wake people up to the simple reality. All Trump's proposal will do is bring back sweatshops, which is probably why he's talking about 1890 instead of 1950.